Josh, you're on mute, so you might want to unmute.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, and thank you all for joining the webinar today, Implementing Open Peer Review at Scale, a case study on transparent peer review. My name is Josh Dahl. I'm a product director at Clarivate, and I'm excited to be joined by our presenters. We've got Mark Domingo, a product manager at Clarivate, Dave Evans, product manager for peer review at IOP Publishing, and Simon Harris, managing editor at IOP Publishing. I'd like to welcome the panel to our presentation. Mark, if you want to go into presentation mode and start the presentation.
Yes. The agenda for today will be first talk about the Clarivate and IOP Publishing partnership. Then we'll give an overview of the transparent peer review service, which is used to implement open peer review at scale. Then we will go on to see IOP's publishing pilot setup and results. And then we'll discuss the future plans of transparent peer review and go ahead with any questions that you might have. If you want to go ahead, Dave, and discuss the partnership between Clarivate and IOP.
Helps if I unmute myself. Yeah, so back late last year, we met with the Publons team to discuss what we could do as a partnership together to further and address some of the problems in peer review. And we came with a partnership which had a number of key themes. The first one was recognition and transparency. The second was diversity. It was efficiency. And out of that, we had a number of kind of projects that we worked on. The first of which was the badge functionality that you will see from transparent peer review. The second was getting some data on the use of Publon's Reviewer Connect and how effective it was for our journals. And third was feeding into the peer review motivations survey, which we put out recently as the peer review motivations report.
Thank you, Dave. I'm going to go ahead and discuss the benefits of opening up, of giving more transparency in peer review. The main benefits here are to provide greater visibility and recognition for the reviewers, at the same time that there's the potential to increase the quality of reviews. Also, there's the potential to advance research and integrity and reproducibility, as well as avoid or impede research manipulation and fraudulent review. As part of different projects, we've seen the interest in opening up peer review is growing. Whilst many researchers maintain reservations about opening up peer review, the interest and support is growing. We can see the different flavors of open review, which could be open identities, open reports, open identities and reports, and open final version commenting. Our transparent peer review option opted for going for open reports and giving the choice to authors, to reviewers, to open their identities or not. I'll pass it now to my colleague Simon to talk a little bit about Dave, to talk about the challenges that publishers face while trying to implement open peer review.
Yeah, so thank you, Mark. So I think this is, I think we can probably speak to many publishers in a similar situation, that we could see a potential need for transparent peer review. We could see how it could be done in theory using metadata exports. But then the reality of getting that through our publication systems was more challenging. And the reality is that there were a mounting other pile of projects that were competing against this. So when we come to our publication systems and say, we want to do this thing, we're not quite sure how you do it. It was obviously met with, we might be able to, we'll put it down to the bottom of the pile, versus how we were able to approach it with the solution that we worked with Publons, and the Clarivate solution was actually all we need is to put some down to an existing API and to put a bit of JavaScript widget onto the page. That's a more acceptable solution to get it pushed through the tech backlog debt. So that's how we've approached it and how it helped us to get it through onto live.
Thank you, Dave. Sorry, we're experiencing some technical difficulties. So the the Clarivate solution to implement open peer review made by Publons is a robust and scalable model that implies minimal work from the publisher. This method is configurable at 3 different points, which are author opt-in, which means that the journal can decide if the authors can opt in or out of transparent peer review, or if authors are opted in by default when submitting to the journal. Reviewer opt-in, which is the same but for reviewers, like either the reviewers have the choice to opt in or out of transparent peer review, or they opt in by reviewing for the journal. And finally, reviewer identity, where the reviewers can decide if they where reviewers can either choose if they want to sign the review reports with their names or as anonymous, or the journal can decide if all the reviewers are anonymous or sign their review reports. Our recommended workflow is to have review authors having the option to opt in or out, reviewers to opt in by default, but being able to choose if they want to sign their review report with their names or as anonymous. Why do we go for transparent peer review instead of open peer review? Open peer review generally implies the obligation of naming the reviewers as well as the authors. In our case, as I just explained, reviewers might have the choice to sign as anonymous or sign with their names.
Mark, just a quick question. Could you put this in full screen mode, full presentation mode?
Yeah, sorry, it appears as full screen mode in my screen. Is it okay if I stop sharing the document and restart it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Can you see it on full screen now?
It is. You may need to go to display settings, and we're seeing the presenter mode. That's fine. If we can keep it as is.
It's just when I do that, it doesn't change the view.
Okay. No worries.
Sorry about that. Sweet. Can you confirm that we're in the Clarivate solution slide, please?
We are. Thank you.
Nice. Thank you. Sweet. Sorry about the technical difficulties. For the workflow for transparent peer review, it involves 5 different steps, in which the first one is once the journals have decided the configuration that they want to use for the journal, as in like the author opt-in, reviewer opt-in, and reviewer identity, we will configure these questions on ScholarOne, where on ScholarOne, upon the submission of the articles and the reviews, we will collect the the author and reviewer options and peer review content. The next step on which we developed with one of our new work with IOP in this case study. Basically, we integrated with their production system in order to receive a production an accepted article feed from their production system. So whenever they accept an article, we get feed of that article. We've got the DOI and the submission ID, and we're able to have a record of which articles we have to check if they have transparent peer review content for. The next step is for us to query ScholarOne for this peer review content, and then we'll proceed to create the Publons article pages and register the DOIs on Publons. These Publons article pages get triggered once the article is published online, and we can retrieve the content from the DOI. The next step would be for the publisher to display what TPR content is would be for us to show the content, the peer review content on the publisher side. For that, that's one of the other development points that we worked with IOP to develop, which is this Publons badge. This Publons badge is a dynamic widget that you can include in your publisher page by dropping 1 or 2 lines of JavaScript. And by checking the DOI of the article, it will allow us to check what peer review content we have on Publons, and depending on that, we'll show a state of the badge or another one. At the moment, there's like 3 different content, 3 different states. There's this like blue state with the red counter, which indicates that there's like peer review content publicly displayed on our site. Then there's the same one without the red counter. That means that there's reviewers that have claimed recognition for the reviews in Publons, and then there's a gray badge for when we don't have peer review content for that article in specific. If you hover over the badge, you can see a summary of the peer review content, and if you click on the badge or in the link, you get directed to the Publons article page, where you can see the article details, and then also it sends us to the peer review history, where we can see in this case, review reports or decision letters or author responses. In the case that the review reports are signed with the name and the reviewer also claimed recognition on Publons, we will direct to the reviewer's profile on Publons, where you can see the number of publications, the times that they have been cited in the Web of Science core collection, the amount of verified peer reviews, and then you can see also these ones going down through the reviewer's profile. I'll pass it to Simon now to explain the setup for the IOP Pilot.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, so our main aim at IOP when setting up our pilot was we wanted to test the demand for TPR from both our authors and from our reviewers. So just to be a bit different, we had it set up so that both the authors and all the reviewers have to opt in order for the review material to be displayed. So just to be clear, if anyone opts out, even just one reviewer, there's no review content published. As I say, this enabled us then to test the demand from both authors and from our reviewers. So the Publons workflow met our needs quite nicely. As you can see here, these configuration options, we actually had all 3 of these options switched on. So when authors submit, they get the choice of opting in or out on their submission form question. And then when we review, each reviewer submits their report, they have the option of opting in or out of their report, of the peer review content being displayed. And if they opt in, then they can, if they want, they can opt to have their report signed, or in most cases, they choose to be anonymous.
Simon, you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. We've been running this pilot on 3 of our journals for more than 6 months now. And we're pleased with how it's going. It's proving quite popular, we think. Almost 60% of our authors on these journals are opting for TPR and they submit their article. And about 45% of reviewers are opting for TPR. And that translates into about 10% of articles being published with the peer review content, bearing in mind, once again, that everyone has to opt in for the TPR content to be displayed. We had some really good positive feedback from our authors in the survey we send out. For example, this one, I think the publishing the reviews online with the article is a big positive step forward and suggests it's made standard for all the articles we publish, something that we'll certainly consider doing at some stage. We've not seen any impact on the peer review times or the willingness of reviewers to report, which is obviously very welcome. And we've seen a small increase in the quality of reviews, judging from the ratings that the editors give in ScholarOne, which was something we hoped for and obviously is really good to see at this stage. And last but not least, in terms of like editor behavior and workload, there's really no change in editor behavior. They don't even look to see whether authors and reviewers have opted into TPR until after the first decision stage. So the review just proceeds as normal in the background. And there's actually very little manual work required, which we're very happy about. There's just a little bit of admin if the author submits their response as an attachment or a reviewer does. And that's something I know that Publons are working to handle in the near future. So yeah, overall, we're really happy with the way the pilot's gone. Working with the Publons TPR service. It's highly automated and very efficient way of doing this. And in fact, we're about to roll this out to a few more of our journals next week, I think. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you, Simon. We're also really happy to have you on board and happy to see that it will be rolled out to 5 more journals from IOPP. So, future plans with TPR. One of the future plans is to improve the publication badge to make it more like understandable, like basing it on the thought that like every time that someone sees a Publons badge, it will be the first time that they see it. We would like them to be able to understand seamlessly and easy what the TPR content available is on Publons. And as Simon just indicated, one of our limitations right now is with showing the file attachments on review reports, decision letters, or editor comments, as I can see in the chat, or author responses. At the moment, we're not able to display these files, but we're working to solve this within the near future. And hopefully, once we can do that, I believe it's also in IOP's roadmap to roll out transparent peer review on all open access journals. And our plan from Clarivate will be to make transparent peer review available to any ScholarOne journals that want to try this on. If you're interested in more details of this case study, you can read the case study that we just published in Science Editor with the details just on the bottom of this slide. Other publishers that are also using transparent peer review at the moment, other than IOP, are Wiley, Emerald, MIT Press, and the Royal Society Publishing. I'll pass it on to you, Josh.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And you know, I've been working with the team on this from the beginning, and I got to say, you know, I think we're really excited to continue moving this initiative forward. You know, we started this over a year ago, and I think it was a question whether we could create a scalable model for journals, especially existing journals that were already on systems, to be able to adopt this sort of open peer review. You know, it's been good to go through these iterations, especially working with IOP to really create a streamlined model for this. And we've shown that there's sufficient demand from authors, reviewers, and editor to continue moving this forward. Really good to be also presenting this during peer review week. And with the theme of trust in peer review, we think that this sort of initiative can really help to continue advancing and providing trust that peer review works. I think, Mark, you can go to the last slide.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, yeah. So let me just start. I will be moderating the Q&A. First of all, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Dave, for the great presentation. We're going to take the next 10 minutes or so to answer some questions. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box or the chat box in WebEx, and we will answer them as we get to them. If we don't get your question, we will follow up afterwards with some results. So I've got a few questions already in the chat. Let me just pull this up. All right, so the first question I've got is, so I think maybe Dave and Mark and Simon, you can talk about this from your perspective. You mentioned the opt-in for both the authors and reviewers. Is that standard? And I think, Mark, from the perspective of transparent peer review, are there other options around that?
Yeah.
Maybe
so
Dave, Simon, and Mark.
Sure, I can start, and then I guess if you want, Simon, you could go ahead on maybe why you went ahead with the configuration that you used for the IOP Journals pilot. Basically, as I said, the options are to choose, like for a journal setting, if all the authors have the capacity to opt in or out of of transparent peer review. By opting in or out, I mean that when they submit an article, they will be asked if they agree to publish the TPR content, the peer review content publicly, which will publish on Publons alongside the article. And then the option is basically to give the authors the option to opt in or out, or don't give them the option to opt in or out. And basically by submitting to that journal, they are opting in. Same for reviewers. In this case, basically the reviewers will have either the choice to opt in or out of transparent peer review, which means that if one reviewer opts out of transparent peer review, we won't be publishing the peer review content. Yeah.
Yeah, shall I pick this up? Yeah, so the reason we chose this setup is that we wanted to be able to measure the demand from authors and the demand from reviewers. So to do that, we had to give both the authors and the reviewers the option of opting in or opting out. So it's made it very easy for us to measure that demand. In terms of that, I think the first question I'm seeing is what about editor comments? So if I can take that question. They are included, assuming they're not confidential comments to the publisher, and they are actually part of the reports that are sent to the author. Then yes, they are. Everything is included, the whole peer review history. So that's all the reports, the author responses, and even the decision letters from the publisher. So it's a really very transparent process.
Excellent. Yeah, we've got a bunch of questions here. Maybe we'll move through these. So the third one was information about the authors or reviewers you find are engaging with transparent peer review. There was a cyber study a few years ago that indicated a lot of skepticism about TPR from early career researchers. Any thoughts on that, Dave and Simon? I know you've done quite a bit of surveys and analysis on those.
Yeah. I've not actually looked at the demographics in terms of what stage of career or in terms of where in the world people are choosing to go with this option. But what I would say in terms of that cyber study, the skepticism from early career researchers, I think that's probably more concern about being named as a reviewer. So I think one of the key points for us when we thought about doing this was to make sure that we gave reviewers the option of remaining anonymous, and that's translated into no change at all in terms of willingness to review, because you've got that option of just having the report there and not signed.
Got it.
Going
Excellent.
back to the peer review patients report, this is some unpublished questions and data that we had, because we weren't quite confident we framed the question correctly. But there were, with that caveat aside, there were some indications that earlier career researchers were significantly more in favour of transparent peer review and other things. And again, as for the demographics, we haven't quite looked into that. I think we probably approaching the point now where we probably have enough data to build a significant picture. So I think, Simon,
Yeah,
happy to dig into that and share that data.
yeah.
Excellent. There was just a question, can we share the link to the publication? We will include that in the follow-up, the science editor publication. So Council of Science Editors journal recently published a case study.
It's free to read, so everyone will be able to access it.
Yep. Another question, are you seeing trends of acceptance in certain areas of research or communities over others?
No, that's an interesting question. And it ties in with one of the other questions is asked which journals we're running this on. And so it's three quite different fields, really. We've got an environmental science journal, a material science journal, and a biomedical engineering journal. And we've actually seen, even though they are quite different fields, very similar opt-in rates. I gave the average in the presentation, but they're more or less within a few percent same opt-in rates for authors and for reviewers, which perhaps surprised us a bit. It'd be interesting to see when we roll it out more widely, whether we get more variation with some of our physics titles, but it's been consistently authors at nearly 60%, reviewers at about 45% opting in.
Yeah,
sorry, we haven't included it in the slides, but happy to send that information of which journals so that people can go and look at the articles.
And just from our perspective too, I can say that the kind of subject areas of the journals that are part of this pilot. So Mark had shown a slide. We have a number of other publishers that we're working with. Subject areas are pretty diverse, and so while there is some fluctuation in sort of opt-in rates for authors and reviewers by subject area, it doesn't seem significant at this point. So I think as we start to see this scale up, we'll have more data to help paint a bigger picture of how, if there are variations by subject area.
Yeah.
Good. So there was a question about IOP. You recently announced your double-blind initiative, and there was a question about how this fits in with transparent peer review.
Yeah, it's a good question, and we actually think they complement each other really well. Because we're currently with single blind review, but I should emphasize the review process takes place just as it would do without transparent peer review. The transparency part comes after acceptance, after publication. So we've come to the conclusion that double blind is the fairest system of peer review. So we think this combination of double blind and TPR, we've got the fairest possible peer review process, followed by maximum transparency after publication by making the peer review process available then.
Excellent. Mark, there's a question. Are we in discussion with other peer review and tracking systems such as Editorial Manager?
I lost you for a second there. Could you repeat the question, please?
It was just about other. Is transparent peer review available on other peer review or tracking systems?
At the moment, for the near future, we are only planning to go with ScholarOne, but we are judging by the interest of other journals, and we will reassess our current position given the interest of other journals.
Great. So there's a question about the API. maybe the workflow slides. And so there's a question about, is the API just for internal communication or can it be used by everyone? And I'm assuming by everyone here, we're talking about anyone, general public, to find and link or download peer review reports.
Sorry, you go on.
You can go ahead.
No, so we used an existing API that we have with our production systems, which linked with Publons. So from a system perspective and systems talking to each other, I think anyone would be able to do this if you had that kind of connection available, if you had that kind of API available. And as Mark said, the API then, what the API feeds is the DOI and the article ID, which is then used to check whether the criteria, did author opt in, yes, no, did reviewer opt in, yes, no, and then that creates the Publons page, which is scalable and automatic. There are manual steps I know other publishers are doing where that information or that check is being fed manually back to Publons, but we wanted to see if we could scale it. So is that used for everyone? I don't think that would be available for everyone in terms of people wanting to get alerts about transparent peer review papers being published. I suppose in theory you could piggyback that, but I don't think that's not available now. So, but in terms of publisher terms, I think certainly other publishers could use that approach if they had APIs available.
Excellent.
Yeah.
There's a question about, and I think Simon, you'd mentioned this a bit about, Simon and Dave, about review quality, but does transparent peer review correlate with higher review quality? Maybe you can talk a little bit more about your views of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's still early days, but one of the journals, the environmental science one, is quite a big journal. Quite a few papers have gone through now, and we have seen a small but significant increase in the average reviewer score that the editors are assigning for papers that were opted into TPR versus papers that opted out. So yeah, it seems as though there's been a small increase in reviewer quality caused by that extra bit of accountability that transparency gives.
Excellent. There was a question just the workflow itself. And this is going back to one of your slides, Mark, on slide 10. There is the export of accepted manuscripts from production to Publons. First off, are you able to filter what you're sending to Publons? So I think in particular, are you doing anything filtering on article types to exclude editorials or other types of articles that maybe you don't want to have transparent peer review?
I suppose with editorials, we wouldn't normally send them out for review. So they wouldn't get opted in to TPR because of that, because there's no, would that be right, Mark? I'm just trying to think from a system point of view. There'll be no reviewers opted in.
That's correct. So
yeah.
Basically, we will only publish TPR content for those articles that have TPR content. In this case, they wouldn't have some.
So it's easy to filter out articles you don't want in that respect, just by simply making sure they're not opted in to transparent peer review.
Exactly.
Excellent. There was another question about authors opting out at submission, and then if so, are they able to modify their selection at later stages?
Yeah. So basically, currently we ask the authors after each submission if they want to opt in or out. And for authors, we check the last submission round, because maybe at the beginning they are not convinced of opting in, but in the last submission round they want to opt in, or otherwise, like maybe for some reason they don't want to opt in transparent peer review in the last submission round. So we check the last answer for the last submission of the authors. In the case of reviewers, as long as there's one opt-out in any submission round, we won't publish the transparent peer review content.
I think I have one more question here. So the question I'm going to decipher, but as other journals usually publish, they don't publish the review reports 1 and 2 separately. They're often found through a rebuttal letter. So I think the question here is just around kind of the publication of all of these different components. Like, has that introduced any complexities, any manual work, Dave or Simon, to kind of help make sure the data flows correctly to Publons, or has it been pretty smooth in terms of having kind of discrete elements, reviewer report 1, reviewer report 2, author response decision letter?
Yeah, it's been really smooth. There's not been any extra manual work. I mean, the only thing we would do is make sure that the reviewer reports, that there's nothing like offensive in them, that they're written in the right way and they're clear. But that's our best practice anyway, so that's not really extra work. But other than that, the process is very smooth.
Excellent. There's a question. Sorry, I said there's the last question. That was there's actually 1 or 2 more that came here into the other chat. Just confirming editor comments. Are those included in what's published in the TPR page? So separate from reviewer comments.
Yes. Yeah. So I think I mentioned before, as long as the editor comments are for the author and not confidential comments for the publisher, then they will be published along with the review reports.
Okay, and then the last thing, and maybe this is just more of a comment. So there's a mention about Copernicus does open peer review for the entire process, not just at the end. And there's perception that the reviewer quality, the reviewer reports are better than what they're seeing in closed review. Do you think, just speculating, do you think that kind of this first step of publishing at the end, do you think that this is a kind of eventual pathway to kind of more comfort and mainstreaming open peer reviews that might exist during the submission and peer review workflow?
I think potentially. I think we when we sort of consulted about this, we found that editorial boards were quite skeptical about the whole idea of open peer review. So we were taking the first steps towards it, and I think it's a question of building confidence and educating people, and potentially that is the end goal.
Yeah, I think like many change processes, you start with something small and you introduce the change and it becomes the norm. But I think you also have to recognize the community views on it, and it's not necessarily just the, let's say, more experienced generation who are opposed to it, or indeed the early career research. The survey responses we had indicated where people were opposed to it, they were strongly opposed to it. There was some, in terms of complete openness, of saying, no, I do not want my name out there. So yeah, there may be, as Josh said, it may be a start towards that, but I think, yeah, being very cautious in that approach, I think would be sensible going forward.
Thank you both. And just one clarification here is, are all of the components published, are they assigned to DOI? Yes,
I think so. That's right, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that during the presentation.
That's right.
We do assign a DOI to all the review reports, decision letters, and author responses, and then you can cite them using that DOI.
Excellent. Well, that is all the questions. That was a hefty Q&A session. So thank you all for the questions. Hopefully we got them all. If you have additional questions, you see our email addresses there. You can send us a note afterwards.
Thank you very much, Josh.